Hello, this is Darren Laners, one of the hosts of Meet, Act, and Part. And after our discussion last evening with Roger, he had contacted us and forgotten to mention where the Path Forward campaign came from. So the Path Forward campaign was born out of a survey that the Scottish Rite Northern Masonic Jurisdiction did about 3 years ago. And this survey was not only for members of the Scottish Rite and the Northern Masonic Jurisdiction, but also for men in a certain age demographic, which they were targeting for potential membership in Freemasonry. So out of that campaign, the Path Forward campaign was born. Out of the Path Forward campaign, the beafreemason.org website was born. The beafreemason.org website is a partnership between the Northern Masonic jurisdiction and Southern Masonic jurisdictions of the ancient accepted Scottish Rite, as well as Shriners International. Roger just wanted to make sure that information was conveyed to you, the listener. I hope that you do enjoy this episode of Meet, Act, and Part, and thanks again for listening. Talk to you soon.
Welcome to another edition of Meet, Act, and Part. I'm your host, Bill Hostler.
I'm Greg Knott.
And I'm Darren Laners.
In this episode, we have a very special guest right with us today. Well, the person we have right now is a person who is very well known within the Masonic community. We have Most Worshipful Brother Roger S. VanGorden, past Grand Master of the Free and Accepted Masons of the Grand Lodge of Indiana, and the founding president of the Masonic Society. Roger has accomplished a lot over his Masonic career, and he's got a couple other things he'd like to come here and talk to us about today. Roger, welcome. It's a great honor to have you here today.
It is definitely my pleasure. And I am flattered to be among the first of your interviewees.
I'm going to embarrass you a little bit before we get started. I know you didn't know this was coming, but Roger is one of the Grand Masters who holds a special place in my heart since I was raised during his year as Grand Master. And I'm sure he doesn't even remember this, but the night I was supposed to be raised to become a Master Mason, I sent him an email. Could you give me a book list of what I should start to learn as a Master Mason? And he actually took time out of his day, and he wrote me a list of books that I should study and read. And I'll never forget that. I mean, it's been almost 20 years, but I will never forget that. And I've gotten to know him over the years, and I really cherish my friendship with Roger. And I just will never forget that. So thank you, Roger, in public, for all that you've done for me and for Freemasonry.
Thank you very much, Bill. The only quibble I have with you is I still can't figure out why you left Fort Wayne for Oklahoma.
I'm going to say probably because it was not 77 degrees and sunny in Fort Wayne today. Can you give us, tell us a little bit about your background, a little bit. How did you become a Mason and what brought you to the door of the lodge?
Okay, I'll be glad to. I grew up here in what was southern Shelby County in Indiana, southern part of central Indiana, almost what might be considered the northern part of southern Indiana. And I was, matter of fact, I still live like 8 miles from where I grew up. I was active in the Order of DeMolay. DeMolay played a big role in my teenage years. And I enjoyed it immensely. And I enjoyed the activities. I enjoyed the ritual. I enjoyed the symbolism that exists in DeMolay. And my father and several family members were Masons. And we were supported well by the Farmers Lodge number 147. And I knew as a teenager, I wanted to be a Mason. The men that I knew at Farmers Lodge, the advisors on my advisory council were all fine men, and as was my father, and I wanted to be like that. As I got older in DeMolay, several of my friends who were just a year or two older had joined the Freemasonry, had gotten very active in the York Rite and Knights Templar and things such as this. And of course, being in DeMolay, you're familiar with the stories of the Templars and of course, Jacques de Molay. And that just added to my interest of Freemasonry. And I remember I was still at DeMolay and was over at the bookstore that existed at the time of the Masonic Home, and I bought an Indiana Masonic Monitor and then started reading it. And of course, the folks there at the bookstore thought that was really odd. You got a teenage boy in here buying an Indiana Masonic Monitor. But I started reading it, and I just enjoyed the message of what was allowed to be put in the monitor, of course. And I thought, this is something I want to be part of. And as my friends were active in lodge, and they would talk about the things that they went to, things that they did, and how much fun it was, in many respects, I saw Freemasonry as DeMolay for old guys. Okay. And it must be a tremendous amount of fun as far as learning, making friends, keeping friends. And that is why I became a Mason. As soon as I turned 21, I asked my dad for a petition. I was raised before my 22nd birthday. And that's my story of how I became a Freemason. Now, in my Masonic journey, I've been fortunate enough to have been very active in the York Rite as well as my lodge, and also some to the Scottish Rite. I was working at the state level on some committees and some appointed offices in the Grand York Rite bodies, and became friends with several of past Grand Masters as well as current Grand Lodge officers at the time. And Mike Brumbach in 1994 asked me to be his Grand Marshal. And I have been involved with the Grand Lodge of Indiana ever since. I served a couple of years as on committees, had another appointed officer before Doug Fagenbush appointed me as Junior Grand Deacon, and I progressed through the Grand Lodge line and became Grand Master of Indiana in May of 2002 to 2003. And what's interesting about what you said, Bill, I congratulate you on your 18 years in Freemasonry, because it's now dawned on me that in Indiana we allow an 18-year-old young man to petition lodge, that there may be some young men that petition lodges in Indiana this year that were born the year I was Grand Master. So that makes you feel kind of old. After being Grand Master, I had some opportunities to work further. I was active in the Philalethes Society as well as some of the appended organizations to the York Rite, things like Allied Masonic Degrees, Knight Masons, York Rite College, and such. And an opportunity came to form the Masonic Society as a way to reach maybe a broader mass of some of the brothers who were interested in Masonic philosophy, Masonic history, discussing Masonry, but maybe not at the scholastic level that one may expect at something like Philalethes or Quanto Coronate. And so we founded the Masonic Society, and it's been around for over a decade now, and it is doing well itself. I had an opportunity to join the Masonic Renewal Committee about 6 years ago. The Masonic Renewal Committee is a committee of the Conference of Grand Masters of Masons in North America. And the Masonic Renewal Committee is one of the lesser known groups within the Conference of Grand Masters. Most Masons, most active Masons are well aware of things like the Masonic Service Association, the George Washington Masonic National Memorial. Those are also committees or groups within the Conference of Grand Masters, and so is the Masonic Renewal Committee. We tend to work in the background, working with Grand Lodges on ideas, programs to enhance Masonic membership. We trade a lot of information in which we may find programs, projects, or ideas may work in a jurisdiction in an area, and we will pass that information on to the Grand Lodges, Grand Lodge officers, and other jurisdictions for them to consider. And that's been what our focus has been. Where we're headed is that we have representatives on our committee from the Supreme Council, Northern Masonic Jurisdiction, as well as the Supreme Council, the Southern Jurisdiction, and Shriners International. and Grand Encampment Knights Templar. And the two jurisdictions of the Scottish Rite and the Shriners have been gracious enough to give us some funding, as well as some Grand Lodges, to help us advance our work in providing more tools for Grand Lodge officers to help them advance as they progress through their several stations, as well as tools for Grand Lodges in general that they may be able to utilize in their own jurisdictions. And of course, as you know, these things cost money, publications, videos, webinars, they can be costly. One thing that we also do is what we call an Engage conference every fall in the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C. The Southern jurisdiction has been very gracious to us in allowing us to use their facility. And that's a conference in which we invite a representative from each Grand Lodge to come, and we discuss issues of the day to Freemasonry. And it's work like this that we do, like I said, kind of in the background, working with Grand Lodges throughout North America to enhance the Masonic experience. And that's kind of in a nutshell who I am and what I do.
Hey, Roger, interesting about the Masonic Society is, so I joined right when it was formed. So I see your signature staring at me every time I walk in my room because you're on my wall here. So that's so I have
makes me feel really good,
whether you know it or not.
No, that's great, Greg. Patty, my wife, I need to record that for her because she doesn't see me as much of a big deal at all, I guess. So. No, I have had the pleasure of doing Greg for quite a number of years also, and it makes me feel well and good inside that in many respects we're next door neighbors, and of course it gives me another opportunity to take a shot at Bill for leaving the Midwest for the West.
Though we're recording this March 1st, I just want to mention, since you're from Indiana and that Darren and I work at the University of Illinois, that the Fighting Illini beat the Indiana Hoosiers today in basketball. So
that happens. Hey, but did you see Bobby Knight came back to Indiana to IU?
Right.
In a number of years, I was surprised and pleased. I was at IU Bloomington during the 1981, 82 or 80-81 season. They won the national championship. And I won't go into stories about what I did during that period of time, but let's just say it was a memorable time for me.
There you go. So I'm curious, before we dig deeper into the new website, et cetera, you were there as the Masonic Society formed, but the time that led up to that period, what were you seeing, or what was the impetus, for that, the Knights of the North? What was it you were sensing in others in Freemasonry that needed a change, that I think was kind of the beginning of the catalyst that here we're seeing 10 or 15 years later? But what was the thought process behind putting some of those early efforts together?
That's an excellent question. And I was going to talk a little bit about this because as we talked about the new website, the be a freemason.org website, I wasn't going to necessarily talk about, hey, it's a great recruiting tool. I was going to talk about there's something deeper about the Path Forward campaign and about the Be a Freemason website that we seriously need to consider. And what you just brought up is the point. For decades now, going back before the founding of the Masonic Society, going back actually to the 1960s, there has been a debate. Matter of fact, you might even say there's been a fight in Freemasonry over what is Freemasonry. And I think it can be distilled into this question. Is Freemasonry a philosophy organized in a club, or is Freemasonry a club with an interesting philosophy? Okay. Now, many of us that are of one opinion, we hold Dwight Smith, past Grand Master of Indiana, longtime Grand Secretary of Grand Lodge of Indiana, in high esteem. Dwight Smith was one of the most prolific Masonic authors of his day. He inspired authors such as Alan Roberts, Jerry Martingale, those guys who were pillars of the Philadelphia Society and who themselves were very prolific authors during their time. Alan Roberts, as you know, has written numerous books. And it can be told also in a story that Thomas S. Roy, who was Grand Master of Massachusetts in 1951 to 1953, told. And Dwight Smith retells this story often. It seems, as Roy tells the story, that Satan and an angel were having a conversation one day. And the angel said to Satan, "God will defeat you." And Satan sat back and said, "Well, pray tell, angel, how is God going to defeat me?" And the angel said, "Because God has given man great principles and high ideals." And Satan strokes his beard and says, "Foolish angel, don't you see that as soon as God gives man these great principles and high ideals, I will institutionalize them. And sooner or later, man will be much more interested in preserving his institution than he is practicing his great principles and high ideals." And this was Dwight's point, is that the soul of Freemasonry is found in the teachings and philosophy of Freemasonry, not the club of Freemasonry. And to further emphasize this dichotomy, this club versus philosophy idea, I remember watching a video that was taken at a conference of Grandmasters back in sometime in the 80s, just prior to the founding of the Masonic Renewal Committee. The Masonic Renewal Committee was founded in 1988, but just prior to that, where the discussion was about Masonic renewal, and the brother that was speaking, in my opinion, viewed that Freemasonry is a club with an interesting philosophy, because he said what Grand Lodges in this country need to do is mimic the shrine philanthropy, and what we need to do is to find that proverbial crippled child and hoist him up on our shoulders and show the world the great work that we do. And I think that you can see this as we've moved forward in time. How many times have you seen an article where a news report about a Masonic event, and the news reporter starts talking to the worshipful master, and the master's trying his best to come up with an answer, talk about what it is Freemasonry does. And he uses the cliche, "Oh, we take good men and make them better." But he always starts hawking the charities. Well, you and I both know the $1 million a day that we used to talk about quite a lot. Vast majority of that $1 million a day was the Shriners Hospitals for crippled and burned children. And then you can throw in Masonic homes too. And when you throw in those, it is a large amount of money. But in terms of what we may do at the local level, it's rather minuscule compared to what the Shriners do and what we do with Masonic homes in this country. But we thought that was the way to recruit. We thought that boy, guys, join our group because we do a lot of charity work. Well, so is the Rotaries, the Lions, a lot of other organizations. And there was this feeling that what is Freemasonry? It's like a Rotary Club with ritual. Is that what Freemasonry is? But you had the two camps. You had those that believed that the soul of Freemasonry is its philosophy, is its teaching, is its way to build a better life, versus those that just saw Freemasonry as a club, as a social club with this ritual you have to do. Another place where you can see this play out is one-day classes. In my opinion, one-day classes is an outgrowth that it's the club, it's the institution of Freemasonry, the club aspect of Freemasonry that's more important than the philosophy or the ritual. Hence, many of us were followers, next generation followers of Dwight Smith, and we were next generation followers of Alan Roberts, and we read their works, and we saw what we saw as the dream of Freemasonry, the vision of Freemasonry, the possibility of Freemasonry. That through that as our ritual says, it will make a comment about improving the individual man improves the community. And we saw that individual man, improving the individual man improves the community. And hence, we've now, what may have been a small number of voices in the 80s and 90s and into the early 2000s has now becoming the preeminent voice, as you see with the Path Forward campaign. And you see with this Be a Freemason website. Because, and this is where I wanted to talk about this different than membership recruitment. Nowhere in any of that literature, nowhere on any of those placards or banners or on that website does it hawk charities. Matter of fact, it really doesn't talk much about a lodge per se, other than these lessons are taught in a lodge. It talks a little bit about the sociability of Freemasonry, but the main portion is being a Freemason, the teachings of Freemasonry, the philosophy of Freemasonry will make you a better man, will make you a happier man. We look back on why men joined Freemasonry. They joined for selfish reasons. Okay. I joined because I enjoyed DeMolay. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot from it. I thought it made me a better young man. Because of those reasons, I want to be a Freemason. Okay. I enjoy Freemasonry because I was interested in giving money to charities or raising for fundraisers for charities or things like this. I did it for something for me. And that's why men have always joined Freemasonry, in my opinion. I think that's one of the beauties of this Path Forward campaign, the whole campaign, including the website, is that we're now realizing that Freemasonry is a philosophy enveloped in a club, not the other way around. And what we're trying to save is not Farmers Lodge number 147's building. We're trying to save what Farmers Lodge number 147, my home lodge, what it teaches and what it tries to do with each individual Mason. So I think that the Masonic Society, as you were talking, Greg, was an outgrowth of this. It's a movement. Okay, it's part of a movement, and if you study movements and study the history of movements, you see that movements often start off in a fringe, and then after they prosper, after they persevere, and they start growing, and more adherence to that movement comes in. Eventually, the movement can become a force, and I believe that even though it's been disorganized, we haven't had a club of Masonic philosophy devotees. There were many of us throughout North America that saw Freemasonry as a wonderful ideal to aspire to, and we loved the sociability at the same time and the friends we made. But we realized that that's part of where this is at, that it's a balance between club and philosophy. You cannot, you can't really practice Freemasonry in isolation. It was made to practice in a social environment, and even our ritual will make comment to that. It's the idea of steel sharpens steel. So I think it's been something that's been going on since the 1960s for a long time. The premier idea, in my opinion, was that it's a club that needs to be saved. The philosophy and the ritual is just something kind of we do. And now that is starting to flip. And we're saying that, no, all along it's been the philosophy, the ideals, the taking a man and making him a better man, making him a happier man. That is what Freemasonry is about. That's my sermon.
Okay, thanks, Roger. Just to follow up, since you kind of ended on that note, I love the current campaign. I think it's great that we've gone and probably 20, 30 years from the to be one, ask one to actually trying to promote our fraternity. My question / concern is what next? So you're putting tremendous amount of effort to recruit new members, but how do we help lodges retain those members and or bring back members that aren't currently coming to meetings?
Okay. And here is again where I look at the Path Forward campaign in a different light. The Path Forward campaign is in a way a mirror to us. That before we can really talk about the general public, we need to talk about who we are as Freemasons, as the organization it is. What is our self-image? What is our self-esteem of Freemasonry? Bill, just to give you an example, Bill the other day had posted onto his Twitter account, about the website and about the campaign. And a brother whom both Bill and I are very well acquainted, is a good friend of ours, and also with Greg's, had made a comment that and then he was just being a little facetious about the appearance of one of the men in the campaign. Didn't look to him to be a guy that ought to be a Mason, and I pointed out, yeah, you're right. I look at those pictures and they're not old, fat, grumpy guys. So yeah, how can they be Masons? And I think that's kind of a statement, a little bit of what we are as a fraternity, or what maybe we see ourselves as a fraternity. And that's one of the things I like about the Path Forward campaign is it has a standard, it has an idea, it has an image that is maybe calling us to be that type of fraternity. Too often, we are caught up for like stated meetings, for example. As I've often said, too many of our stated meetings are reading minutes, paying bills, and then eating spaghetti on paper plates. Gone are the times when Masons got together and they talked about maybe the great events of the day. They discussed the arts and sciences. They discussed Masonic philosophy. They discussed their own lives. Yeah, and those days have been gone for quite a long time, possibly with the rise of what Alan Casselu in one of his presentations calls the town square Freemasonry, when Freemasons started meeting in buildings of their own, and many of the buildings were in the town square. Yet still, in that era, they were more engaged with the community and with each other than what we may seem to be today. And perhaps our answer is returning back to some of those practices. Back in the 1870s, 1880s, for example, Masonry here in Indiana, I'm sure in Illinois and Oklahoma was the same. It was often that if a brother fell on hard times or a widow was in need, a lodge without doubt went and helped her. There's a story of a coal strike not far from Greg Knott in Indiana, but just over the border, between the border here in Indiana and Illinois, in which the lodges in the county got together and helped the striking miners. And I sat there and I go, there's no way we would do that today. No way we would do that today. Matter of fact, many of our members would sit and point at those brothers and say, well, it's their fault they're in this trouble. And I think to myself, how we've changed, what's happened to us. And I lay some of this at the feet of Grand Lodges, because during that time, my Grand Lodge looked at the lodges around Indiana and said, they're doing good works. They're visible in their communities. They're working in the communities. They're taking care of their members. But boy, the ritual work is sloppy and their books are terrible shape. So what we've got to do is we need to have these grand inspectors, we'll call them, and they'll go around to lodges and they'll inspect their record books and they'll inspect their ritual performance, and we'll start grading them on that. And that's what the Grand Lodge did. Nowadays, our Grand Lecturers, we've taken the old Masonic office of Grand Lecturer and turned it into a ritual instructor and financial and membership record reviewer. And we're still doing it 150 years later. And lodges don't do what lodges did during the period of time, because Grand Lodges told us that's not important. What's important is good record keeping and good ritual performance. And I think that's some of the changes some of the evolution that we've made in Masonic lodges over the course of the last century that have put us in the position we are right now, where, quite frankly, most of our members, we really don't know how to answer the question of what is Freemasonry when we're asked, because we've as Thomas Roy's story said, we've become far more interested in preserving the institution than we are practicing the high ideals and such.
I agree with you on so much of that, Roger. I mean, I know a lot of my time is spent on, because I'm a treasurer of two organizations, a secretary of another. And, that's fine. I spend a lot of time, running to the bank and all that, but that's not at all what interested me in the fraternity. Now, I know there's a business side of it that we need to attend to, but I think you're spot on when you describe that evolution to where we're at today. To, when the district deputy comes for his night to look at the books and grade the ritual, etc., then that's fine. That stuff's important, but we don't spend near enough time, even though I think we're beginning to, on really making the individual man better and talking about how to do that. And I'll let Darren he can talk more about what Illinois is doing, but as a Grand Lodge to encourage education. But I think you're exactly right. We just evolved through the 60s into the 70s and maybe 80s, and we just become simply an administrative club. I even argue I'm not sure we're even a social club anymore, because we were just chasing dues and doing the minutes and whatnot, and we completely forgotten. So you would have a generation or two of men that came in, maybe more than that never experienced that philosophical side. And now here we are another 20, 30, 40 years later, and we're looking at each other saying, well, is that all there is? Because, the younger generations, and it's not just them, if they're asking, what is that value proposition? And there's lots of ways they can go do charitable events. And I'm never one that'll knock charitable events, but I agree with what you've said, Roger. We're not a charity, and the Shrine and others do just amazing work. But that work should be done or because of great men that come out of the fraternity, not just because it's the charity itself. I think in some ways, becoming a charity, especially in a local lodge level, it's easier to write $200 check to the food bank than it is to spend time talking about the philosophical side of the craft, which will make men better. I feel good when we donate to the food bank or the Boy Scouts, but that's not why we're there. But yet I think sometimes we take the easy route out and can write the check or do the fish fry or whatever. And in the bigger picture, we've kind of lost our way. So I'd like to hear Bill and Darren weigh in a little bit on this too.
Yeah, Greg, we've had this discussion many times regarding this, and we're of the same mind that it's okay for us as Freemasons to be selfish, to take care of ourselves, to want to improve ourselves, to want to treat ourselves. I've often brought up the idea, many of the three lodges that we both kind of belong to, we should take some of the money that's sitting in a CD, not gaining any interest, and take ourselves out to dinner. What's the harm in that? We have some fellowship. Maybe some people see us having a good time and we get a guy to petition. We don't do enough to promote ourselves within our own communities. And, unfortunately, a lot of that does require spending some money. It's well and good for us. And don't get me wrong, I understand that charity is one of the cornerstones of the fraternity, but we need to also be charitable to ourselves.
I think I'm with Roger. I always have been. I mean, I'm just like him. I have a picture of Dwight Smith on my wall along with Rob Morris. But, Dwight used to say back in the 60s in some of his writings how a lot of the people in Freemasonry with them, as the sky's falling because we're losing membership, as they would say, that we should just find a body part and exploit it and then try to, show the world how good boys we are. And if you look up Masonic charity, just Google Masonic charity, you're going to find everything from the Freemasons gave $50,000 to help poor, to buy a bus for this group, or Freemasons give $100,000 to help this group do this. Yeah, but you won't see hardly anything about the Freemasons helping a brother's widow who needed her electric paid, or another brother's widow was living in a house that was about to fall down, get help. Or just, you might, we pay lip service to them once in a while in some lodges. We'll send them roses at Christmas saying, oh, isn't that nice? We remembered our widows, and it just grates me. And not long ago, I ended up just pulling out of a Facebook group because this group, they posted a thing and everybody was saying how amazing it was, is that the local Masonic Lodge donated money to the local school system and paid off all the school children's lunch debts that were in arrears, so that they didn't, they all had a balance of zero on, their school lunch tickets, so they could eat lunch and they didn't have to pay for it. And don't get me wrong, it's nice. It's really nice. And as a former parent, of children in various marriages, I remember how hard it was sometimes to come up with the money. But I also asked, what about the widows of the group? Or is there a brother that may be having a hard time keeping, making ends meet with his family? Have they checked on them to even see, do they need anything? And I was called a troll. I was told that I was just trying to cause problems and that, of course, I couldn't say anything positive about anything and I'm just so negative. And I finally just got to the point where I'm like, you know what? I really don't need this. Obviously, you guys don't get it. And this is why, ever since we turned the West Gate into a turnstile, it's just what we have. And sometimes, people who don't follow Masonic history, yes, we give $1 million a day, and most of that, yes, is from the Shriners. But they don't stop and think, and if you do any reading about the Masonic history of the Shrine, the reason they started the hospitals in the beginning was because the Shrine was about to become clandestine because they was getting such a bad reputation among Grand Lodges that they finally came up with a good reason to stay relevant and so they wouldn't be, clandestine. So they started the hospitals. They decided to go up and they and they made it, modeled it after the Texas Scottish Rite hospitals. It's just, we've forgotten about Masonic charity, and it's just, true Masonic charity. So much of it has just gone by the wayside, and I agree with everything you guys have said. It's just sitting back. Once we get these guys in, we need to retain them. Another thing Roger hasn't mentioned is that the Masonic Renewal Committee also has a scholarship. Last year, I believe it was, they had an essay contest. It was like, what do we need? I believe it was to retain Masonry. Was that what that was, Roger?
Yes, that it was. We had One year it was, what does Masonic renewal mean to you? Last year, I believe it was about what would you change? What would you add? What would you do with Freemasonry to meet Masonic ideals?
So, Roger, walk us through the Be a Mason website and what its focus is. If I'm either a Mason or not a Mason, what will I find there?
Okay.
And how do you see, or the committee see, that it'll be utilized by the general
Okay.
public?
Sure. What it does when you go to it, it will talk a little bit about Masonic ideal. I'm going to try to see if I can bring it up here. But what it does, it talks about Masonic ideals. It starts out with the picture, with the placard that we're all familiar with, not just a man, a Mason. And then it talks about the first steps. There's a button to give you the first steps, and it talks about how to become a Mason. Well, there's also tabs, which it discuss Masonic life, and that discusses the things about lodge, what happens in lodge life, and again, it talks about brothers coming together without outside or coming together with a common philosophy. We don't discuss particular religions. We don't discuss politics. It brings together brothers regardless of their race, religion, political backgrounds, join together in this philosophy, working to become better men, developing friendships that last a lifetime. It talks a bit about the Masonic symbolism and why we have the symbols, what is the purpose of them. And then it does discuss Masonic charity, but it talks a bit about why we do charitable work rather than hawking individual charities. It notes that, yes, we do have national charities, but we also work at the local level. It brings a higher mind of Freemasonry in my point. It doesn't focus so much on we have these social events and such. And by the way, we give all this money to this charity or that charity. It starts out talking about Masonic philosophy, Masonic ideals taught at the local level among men that are friends or becoming friends, that are looking out for one another, helping one another to become better men, which again, I keep going back to, it's a twist on what used to be the what I call the clubbable method, which was, let's not talk so much about philosophy, ritual, and that kind of stuff, Masonic symbolism. Let's talk more about what we do at Lodge when we have events, and let's talk about these particular charities that we raise money for. It's a flip of that. And then, of course, there's a section that talk about Masonic degrees that tells you a bit about entered apprentice degree, fellowcraft degree, master mason degree, and even goes in and tells you to the point of the symbolism of youth, manhood, and age, and what that means as you develop through the 3 degrees. There's a page on the family of Freemasonry, which talks about all the appendant bodies. So much so that they've also included a list of some of the lesser known bodies that I know Greg and I are familiar with, having attended Masonic Week in Alexandria area over a number of years. And they do mention, of course, the Philalethes Society, the Masonic Society, as well as some other scholastic type of organizations, as well as organizations that are tied to the York Rite that are more invitational type. And of course, a frequently asked question section that answers basics of what's a Mason, why should I become one, who can become one, how do I find a lodge near me, why does Freemasonry use symbolism, where did it come from, what does it cost, those kind of questions. I believe also in it does answer the question about Freemasonry religion, which is, as we know, those of us who remember the times back in the 1990s when we had several attacks upon us from certain religious groups. it is addressed in here as well as Freemasonry is not a religion. We accept men of all faith. One of the greatest answers that I've known to that question is one of which John Robinson, the late Masonic author, gave when he said that from what he saw, Freemasonry does not place one religion above another. What Freemasonry does is allow each Mason the equal opportunity to worship as he chooses, practice according to his conscience, as opposed to an attack that we teach a religion. So I think that the website answers a lot of the basic questions of what Freemasonry is, what it stands for. Again, what I appreciate about it most is the emphasis that it places on what I would call Masonic philosophy, the Masonic ideals, the teaching of Freemasonry itself, over some of the other aspects that maybe we promoted or at least thought we should promote over the course of the last 40 years in particular. The website, if let's say that you're not a Mason, and you go to the website and you've clicked on the section early in the website of taking the first step, it's called. It asks you some questions about where you live and such, with its goal of sending you to a website within the Grand Lodge, within the jurisdiction in which you live. For example, I would go in and, of course, tell it that I'm in the United States, and then it would ask me, for the state, and I choose that, and then after a little bit more, it will direct me to a website here in Indiana, of which I would give information, state my interest in being a Mason. The Grand Secretary here was telling me just yesterday that within the first couple of days of this site going live and being able to be found through search engines, they received no less than 10 inquiries about Freemasonry. So I think that's positive. But again, the thing that I enjoy about the path forward and be a Freemason is that for those of us who are Freemasons, it calls us to be something better than I think maybe we are. Some things that Greg and Bill were both saying, it's calling us to be that fraternity that we tell each other in our ritual that it is. Our installation ceremonies are all copied from one another. And in it, there may be a sentence that will say to the effect that the purpose of Freemasonry is to be happy and communicate happiness. And we know that as an Errant Apprentice, early in the Errant Apprentice degree, we're taught that Freemasons care about each other's welfare, equal with their own, not kind of maybe, but equal with their own. So here we have the installation. Here we have the Errant Apprentice degree calling us to something higher and better. And going back, Darren, to something you said earlier in the interview, you were asking, in effect, bridging the gap. We've got this great website now. We've got this great Path Forward campaign. Men will be coming in, but what will they find? And that goes back to what I was alluding to earlier, that we need to become the promise of the Be a Freemason website. We need to become the promise of the Path Forward campaign at the local levels. That's our self-image. That's our self-esteem. And we need to raise it. And actually, I think we need to do that quickly, of course. And I think that we need to do that before we can really have a serious conversation about bringing a lot of men into this fraternity. Is that we have to get back to the idea of maybe what we were in the past, some things that we were talking about earlier. But the website itself is it's one of the best, if not the best website out there for someone who's not familiar, have heard about the Masons, wonder what they're like, what it's all about, to go to and get a good idea, a good basic elementary understanding of Freemasonry. it's an excellent website. And for us as Masons, it's an excellent website and campaign for us to aspire to.
Well, it's a great website. And for our listeners, it's beafreemason.org. And we'll put it in our show notes. I think we can easily list it. And Roger, I think we're going to have you back on again because we barely scratched the surface. We've got to about an hour here already, but want to thank you for coming on. And just a few final thoughts from the three of us. I think we're in a self-reflection time, and a lot of the work that has been done over the last 10 years has started that self-reflection. I don't even individually sure, but as a fraternity as a whole, I think as we've outlined in this episode, some of the things of what direction should the fraternity go, or more importantly, what is the fraternity? What's its purpose? And I think we're well on the road to redefining what Freemasonry is, but redefining it to what it was originally intended to be. And I feel good about the efforts that are started. I think the challenge for each of us is to go into our own lodges and start these discussions. And Darren and I have done this locally, and we've had some good success already, but we know we've barely scratched the surface. So I want to let Darren and Bill finish out, and then Roger, we'll see if you have any final thoughts.
Yes, first, thank you so much, Roger, for taking time to get on here. I just I know it's a marathon, not a sprint, and we have to remember that. It's nice to know that there are, and I hopefully others listening to the podcast feel the same way, that there are men like yourself and others that are, spending a lot of energy to do this, because it takes a lot of folks to buy in and have the same vision. So I just want to thank you for having that vision, and for your time today, again, for coming on and sharing that with us.
Saying the sky is falling and saying that Freemasonry is going to die, that's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Freemasonry for the last couple hundred years has survived despots. They've survived people who've tried to exterminate it. They've survived slander. We've had people say all kinds of things to try to get us stamped out. And you know what? It hasn't worked. Every day I get people trying to get a hold of us, to the Midnight Freemasons from third world countries, begging to become Freemasons. And if there's still that kind of spirit in the world, there's no way that Freemasonry is going to die. We just have to continue to put it in a positive light and continue to put it on the right track. And that's all it is. We have to go back on the right track. And I think things like this website, with people like Roger VanGorden, Greg Knott, and Darren Laird, it can't help, and the rest of the Midnight Freemasons and other people that we know. It's not, it can't help but survive, but not only survive, but flourish. And I just want to thank you all, and I want to thank all of you who took the time to listen, because it's people like you out there that's going to make Freemasonry continue.
Roger, any final thoughts as we wrap this episode up?
Just quickly, which is hard for me to do, but I'll try. I think the three of you have said exceedingly well. Greg, you guys are correct. Now, on a point of reflection, what are we really to become? Those of us who have believed the importance of Masonic philosophy and Masonic teaching as crucial to this fraternity, our time has come, and this is our time to work in Freemasonry and truly meet its maxim of improving the character of the individual man and improving the community. And the thing that we can never forget, as I've said countless times, all Freemasonry is local. All Freemasonry is local. Grand Lodge is not going to improve your lodge. Your lodge, working in your local community, being visible in your local community, making good men better in your local community is the crux of this. All Freemasonry is local. It's us working in our own lodges, becoming better men, becoming better Freemasons.
Roger, we appreciate you being on here with us. Guaranteed you're going to be on another episode. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. And from the bottom of my heart, let me say thank you for all the work you've done, not only on this project, but getting the Masonic Society going and many other things, because it was an organization I joined right away and learned a lot from meeting all of you and attending Masonic Week and reading the journals, etc. So you've certainly made an impact on me, and I deeply appreciate it. So thank you again on behalf of all of us. With that, we'll conclude this episode of Meet, Act, and Part, and we hope you'll tune in next time for another exciting episode. Thank you.